when we're doing these presentations, because you all self-selected to be here today. But you can recognize that many times there's maybe some cognitive dissonance on the boards that you serve on, some questions about, why are we doing this, and how do we do this? Is now the right time? And recognizing the value of it and the urgency of it in the time that we're in, I think is really important. And that's what this presentation really speaks to. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides here. Thank you, Nicole. You helped me with getting through part of my presentation with that awesome introduction. So I won't need to get into my background as much here. I will share our Diverse Sports on Boards program, which Nicole mentioned. We partnered with the University of Pennsylvania in 2017. We launched, and we now have, we're on cohort 6 now, 160 graduates of the program, where we'll have 30 graduates and by next month. And by the support of organizations like the Philadelphia Foundation, who Melissa's a part of here, and Knight Foundation, William Penn Foundation, who's been a huge supporter of the program. Also corporate partners like Comcast and Accenture and others who are sponsoring talent through the program, Capital One, Knight Foundation. And this program, since 2017, we've been able to actually now fill 125 plus board seats over the last 4 years with this program. And as Nicole mentioned, it's really just an evolution of a professional network that we've built in for many years, recognizing that I'm being asked to serve on a lot of boards, and I have learned to say no to much more than I say yes to, but wanted to be able to also recommend individuals that can serve. There's so many competent individuals throughout our region that can serve on boards. And I always tell people, that go through our board program that are mid to senior level executives within their firms, that you don't need this board training to qualify, if you will, to serve on a nonprofit board. I always say everyone should have the right to serve on a board at the same level of incompetence as everyone else. And anyone who served on a board or managed the board recognize that most people don't come in with even, board governance 101, if you will. It's pretty much baptism by fire in many cases. So this is an opportunity for them not to just show up, and be diverse faces in high places on boards, but make sure their presence is felt and really bring value. And in many cases where they may be a minority on the board, to make sure that they feel confident that they are able to bring their whole self and bring that cultural competency that many organizations certainly need, and can't afford for people to be quiet or be silent because they feel like they don't necessarily fit in or don't necessarily know where they can bring value. So I'll start with just a few of the quotes that you may hear around diversity and inclusion to kind of bring it home a little bit more. Some of you may have heard the phrase or quote, diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is actually being asked to dance. Diversity is what we see. Inclusion is how we feel. And lastly is diversity is counting heads, and inclusion is making sure the heads count. So I've picked those up along the way. Feel free to use those as well in your journey as you're trying to help people to understand the importance and the value. Now, equity has been another term that's been entered into the for-profit sector. The nonprofit sector has been talking about it for some time, and sometimes it's confused with equality, where equality is many times one size fits all. It's kind of around just everyone gets the same exact kind of treatment, where equity is really meeting people where they are, making sure that the end result, that we're meeting people and giving them what they need to succeed. So this illustration really helps to understand that. And there's another one that shows and says, why was, where the gate is gone, where they remove the gate and say, why was the gate even constructed? And who was it constructed for, if you will? So thinking about also, are there structures that we're working around, and maybe those are structures to be reevaluated and to remove barriers that do not need to exist. Now, obviously, diversity is a very general term. There's many different dimensions of diversity. Many times we'll have people, speaking about diversity in different ways, not necessarily speaking the same language when it comes to diversity and what that means. When I think about the kind of the major areas of diversity that we're hearing about most, I think of the acronym REGARDS. REGARDS helps me to remember just, race and ethnicity, gender and age, religion and disability or physical abilities and sexual orientation. And when you look at this chart here, you see in the middle is typically the types of diversity that we talk about the most. These are many times the visible diversity, things that you can see, things that people can't necessarily hide, if you will. Many times and can't change. And it lands on people differently when they're being discriminated or being excluded based on things that are not invisible, if you will, diversity that they cannot get in front of, or even try to many times are navigating spaces in ways that stereotypes are already putting them behind the 8 ball, if you will, when it comes to having influence and impact in the rooms that they serve. So let's talk about some of the research and some of the reports that have come out around the importance of diversity, especially in a time when there's seismic demographic shifts. McKinsey actually did a study and shows that companies in the top quartile of gender diversity of their executive team is 21% more likely to be above average profitability than companies in the fourth quartile, in the bottom quartile. For that same study with racial and ethnic diversity, organizations in the top quartile of companies were 33% more likely to outperform in profitability. Now you say, gender diversity and racial ethnic diversity is actually higher in outperformance. It's not that these are, one is more important than the other. It's the fact that there has been more progress around gender diversity in many spaces than it has been racial and ethnic diversity. So we're seeing, that emerging opportunity for organizations to truly add that dimension of diversity to their organizations. In fact, in the nonprofit sector, gender diversity is much higher in the nonprofit sector. Someone mentioned about boards. Certainly in the corporate space, gender diversity is a huge issue. In the nonprofit space, not so much an issue in the senior level ranks, but racial diversity is is an emerging opportunity for organizations to say it, say it in a optimistic in a way that opportunity for us to gain it. And I just been really, it's been great to see the level of interest around this, and I believe in many cases genuine interest around diversifying the board, particularly from executive directors within this space, and in some cases the boards as well. So I just commend you all again for being a part of this conversation and having the curiosity around how to do this better. In fact, Board Source, I'll just give a quick statistic. I don't have it on the slides here. Board Source in 2017, I believe, did a report. It's Leading with Intent, and talked about diversity in the nonprofit sector, and shared that 86% of board and executive leadership of nonprofit organizations are white, and just 16% people of color. And as we know, there's the demographics of our country, and many of the areas or cities where organizations and nonprofits, are most frequent. These are populations that are much more diverse than the boards that actually lead those organizations. In fact, across the country, 44% of millennials, 44% of millennials are people of color. In fact, the next generation, Generation Z, if you will, 51%. And millennials will be 75% of the workforce in the next 5 years or less. So it's important to recognize that this is really important in Generation Y and Generation Z. They have a different expectation from organizations that they're looking to work for, and want to be a part of organizations that are great, that are doing well, that are making an impact, and they want to be a part of organizations that clearly are in the top quartile of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've seen that over the last year. Organizations, people from all different walks of life who are demanding that their organizations be much more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So let's talk about some of the proven benefits around diversity, equity, and inclusion. One, it increases the organization's ability to recruit and retain top talent within the organization. As you know, the question came up earlier. My network looks like this, and we all have networks that many times look like us. So many times, getting out of our own communities to recruit others from other communities now opens up another network, a social network that you may have not had access to. That's been, one of the reasons many times I've been recruited on boards, and very clear that understanding why, because I do have a wide network, and many times bringing those relationships. Typically, I'm on the governance committee and the nominations committee to help diversify boards and able to have that network effect work on my behalf in those cases. But nothing draws diversity, attracts and retains diversity like diversity. So it starts somewhere in order to recruit others into it. So it may be hard to cross that chasm, if you will, in the beginning, but the opportunity to have that network effect start working on your behalf is very powerful. It opens up new segments of donors, volunteers, and advocates for your organization. I'll give a quick example. I'm on the board for Community College of Philadelphia Foundation, and our board chair is now Miss Dr. Ellen Jo Waller. She's the first lady for Enon Baptist Church, and right there in Mount Airy, one of the largest African American churches in the city. And one of the things that she does every year, her and her husband, Pastor Waller, they actually do a fundraiser where they actually, from the pulpit, they allow a couple organizations present their organization. And one year we actually, Community College was able to do a 15-minute presentation. And in 15 minutes, we raised $100,000 from their congregation towards this cause, and entered more donors into our ecosystem, small individual donors who are very passionate about the work that Community College is doing. I also, to that same board, I recruited a friend of mine who's also a fraternity brother of mine, and an NFL player, Malcolm Jenkins. Invited him to be on the board. It was actually the first board he was a part of. Again, that's a different type of diversity. He has over 500,000 followers on social media. He knows some people in high places. We were trying to get Kevin Hart to, who's a alumni, or at least step foot on Community College's campus for a little bit of time, and we've been trying to reach him for a couple of years, and he said, well, let me text him right now. And he makes a text to him and gets a confirmation. Unfortunately, he recently had that car crash, but incident. But it's very powerful to think about other types of diversity as well, and ways you can tap into markets that you may not ultimately have access to. Also, it increases innovation, creativity, and accuracy of solutions. Many times we think that people who are closest to the money are closest to the solutions, and that's not the case. The reality is, you want to make sure that you have diversity, and that you can actually have diversity of thought, and people who are closer to some of the challenges that you're looking to address as well. I'm sorry, I'm going to grab my charger really quickly. Saw that red pop up. All right. And also, it increases your ability to better service diverse clients and customers. Helps organizations to better benefit from cultural competency and avoid costly and embarrassing mistakes due to cultural blind spots. And we've seen that over the last year, a lot of organizations just having blind spots. And would you all agree that we all have blind spots? We all have blind spots, right? So it's not, no one has a monopoly on blind spots. We all have blind spots regardless of our background, race, our ethnicity, and gender. And the issue is that when there's homogeneous boards, can fall prey to strategy blind spots in any context, but the stakes are especially high when a board is ill-equipped to understand the impact of its decisions on the communities that it seeks to serve. And that's important to recognize that, many decisions we're making at a board level or executive level have long-lasting impacts on communities that we may not be as clear on. So it's really important to think about that. And I'm going to use some examples here that many of you may have seen and may be aware of. Let me see if I can actually see more of your faces here. All right. So some of you may have remember the H&M debacle, if you will. And if you look to the left here, the picture, you probably can recognize that you know, the young boy on the right has survival expert on his shirt, and the African American boy on the left has the coolest monkey in the jungle on his shirt. And adults made this, you know, made this blunder, if you will. If you look at the little boy on the right side, he's looking like, I don't think that's a good idea, right? That's what his face looks like. He even knew this is a bad idea. And clearly the advertising agency or organizations that was responsible, or people were responsible for this, didn't recognize the historic, you know, dehumanization of African Americans and how it was used to sanction slavery in different ways by comparing African Americans to monkeys and things of that sort, and how harmful this, you know, this image was. And some people may have just kind of brushed it off, but not understanding, you know, all the implications of that. And Questlove, who's a musician, you may see him on a late night show, and has over 1.2 million followers, says all this tells me about H&M is that the seats in the boardroom lack something. Want to take a guess? Now, typically you may say, well, this is management, you know, this does not even have to do with the board, but there's less tolerance for organizations. Everything rises and falls on leadership and board oversight and controls, and making sure systems and things are in place that things like this don't happen. And obviously post this circumstance, you know, H&M took a heavy hit, and, you know, not only domestically, but internationally, and made a lot of shifts and changes and put controls in place to hopefully make sure that something like this doesn't happen in the future. But it just shows that boards are more in the spotlight and having much more responsibility around what's happening within organizations. Some of you in Philadelphia may have seen this magazine, or and also seen this and heard about this in 2015, where, you know, Philadelphia, which is predominantly African American city, you know, basically Philadelphia magazine showed an image of basically a guide to schools, and had no African American, you know, children or any diversity, if you will, ethnic racial diversity within this on the cover page, which just shows a blind spot that, you know, normalizing the fact that, you know, lack of diversity in the city that's predominantly African American. So again, things like this, and obviously got a lot of backlash, and it was a big story, and, you know, a lot of pressure on the organization for many years to just do better in that respect. But again, we all have blind spots, and I just one of the things I want to accomplish here is just establish a level of I would say intellectual humility, because, you know, I had an engineering background. I went to University of Pennsylvania for engineering, and I always sometimes saw things in black and white, or zeros and ones, if you will. You know, there's right and there's wrong, but the reality is sometimes there's gray areas. Sometimes there's things that shift and change, and our minds are not as perfect as we think they are. You know, just because we think it doesn't always mean that it's right. So I'm gonna give a couple examples here, and if you guys will find your chat, just find your chat feature, and I'm gonna ask you to, in this case, when you go to your chat feature, just find your private chat and send me a private message. Okay, I want you to first to just read these 4 short lines to yourself. Okay, and then in your private chat to me, and I'll read it off, just send me how many times you see the letter F in this short paragraph. And it doesn't matter if it's capital letter or lowercase letter. It's not a trick question. Just send me the number of times you see the letter F. Okay. And as I get, thank you, Xenia. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Jim. Okay. I'm going to read off the answers that I have here. And again, I know we're all literate and we're all reading the same message here. The numbers that I'm getting is 5, 3, 5, 5, 3, 6, 3, 2, 6, 3, 3, 3, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6, 5. So the threes have it. If we think about the majority, right? If we think, and someone just, I saw Joy say 4. Well, the 6 actually is correct. There's 6 F's in this statement. Now, I know people who don't see 6 are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And I was one of them a number of years ago when I first read this, but if you go through it again and see if you see the 6 F's. For those who do not see the 6. Now, for those who are having trouble, you may recognize that you may have overlooked the F's in the letter of. And if you read it again and count the F's, he said, I do not, and it's freaking me out. That's it. That's wow, right? So I'm getting the responses here. And you can take it out of private chat now. You can chat to everyone. That's fine. Someone said I overlooked scientific as well. Yeah. So again, you see how many times we operate as boards. If we were just taking a vote here, the threes would have it, and we would be inaccurate. So wisdom of the crowd doesn't always work, right? We had much more threes than anything else in this case here. Let's go to another example. Let's see here. So if you all would just write in the an estimate, if you've actually had your driver's license for over 10 years, just say yes. Over 10 years. Let's make sure. And if no, just go ahead and you don't have to do private message me anymore. We'll do this to everyone. Okay, so everyone. Okay. No more private messages. You guys can send it to everyone now. Okay, so we have a lot of experienced drivers. All right, we have a lot of experienced drivers. So I'm going to ask 2 simple questions. We have fleet management as well, so super expert. So just 2 quick questions. The first question, and I'll just ask you to answer one at a time, is what color is a stop sign? Just go ahead and drop it into the chat. What color is a stop sign? And this is not a trick question. Just go ahead and drop what color is a stop sign. Red, red, red and white, red and white, red. Okay, so let's say the reds and red and white has it. Okay. Y'all do direct message, or actually to everyone. The second question is, go ahead and drop it in the chat. What color is a yield sign? Go ahead and drop it into the chat. Yellow, yellow and black, yellow, yellow. Someone said red. Someone said no clue. Yellow, yellow and black. So I saw a couple reds, 1, 2, 3 reds, but mostly everyone said yellow, yellow and black, yellow. Then Nicole said red and white. So it looks like the yellows have it. However, the reds are right. Yield signs have not been yellow and black since 1971. 1971. Now, I'm going to share with you in 2006, this example was shared with me. I wasn't born in 1971. So it doesn't even matter how old you are. And I heard this example in 2006. And I was blown. I said, I said yellow like everyone else did. And I was in New Orleans when I saw the presentation. And she said, no, they're red and white. And I'm thinking to myself, no, not in Philadelphia. They're definitely, yellow in Philadelphia. And I got back to Philadelphia and realized that they were red and white, just like she said. And this is 15 years ago. 15 years ago. And just recently, about 4 years ago, I asked my daughter, I said, sweetheart, what color is a yield sign? And she said, yellow and black. I said, interesting. You see that sign across the street? She said, yeah. I said, what color is it? She said, it's red and white. I said, what kind of sign is it? She said, a yield sign. I said, why did you say it was yellow? And she said, my teacher told me that it was yellow. So we're passing it down. We're passing persistence of thought down generation to generation as well. And we really think about the implications of this and how it could really, not having that diversity of thought. And obviously there are people who said red and white, but again, many times consensus rules, the majority rules. And in many cases, and if we don't explore a little deeper into why people see it as red and white and ask questions, we could just, we can miss out again on accuracy of solutions. And I think about when my daughter shared with me that she still thought it was yellow and black. I thought about the story of a little girl who goes to her mom and says, Mom, why is it that every year when you make the roast, you cut the end of the roast before you put it in the oven? And her mother thought for a minute, said, you know what? I'm not sure. My mother used to do it when I was young. Ask your grandma. She went to her grandmother and said, Grandma, why is it that every year when you make the roast, you cut the end of the roast before you put it in the oven? And her grandmother thought and said, you know what? I'm not sure. My mother should do it when I was younger. Ask your great grandmother. She went to her great grandmother and said, Great grandma, why do you cut the end of the roast before you put it in the oven? And she said, sweetheart, I don't cut the end of the roast. I said, wait a minute. Grandma said when she was younger, used to cut the end of the roast when she was younger, and she did it when my mother was younger, and we still do it today. She said, oh yeah, back then I had a small pan and the roast didn't fit. So I had to cut the end of the roast in order for it to fit. So sweetheart, since then I got a bigger pan. I get my whole roast. And the question is, how many of us are cutting the ends off on life, on impact, on the impact our organizations can make based on someone else's old, small pan? Things are constantly changing. If we're not asking questions, if we're not challenging ideas, if we're not having constructive conflict and circumstances to really stress test our beliefs and where there may be persistence of thought that's interrupting our ability to make impact. We don't have voices that are closest to the solutions who are real time in these spaces. We have a lot of blind spots. And we may be very confident, these are very simple examples here, but think about the complex challenges that we're actually facing and how much that persistence of thought can take us way off track for where we need to be as far as the impact we're trying to make in the communities we're looking to serve. So you may not think that you're causing challenges or causing harm in circumstances, but many times you certainly can. And I saw someone in the chat talking about social proof. I'm going to play a quick video here around social proof, because even when people think that they're, and I'm going to see if we can switch here. People will typically, many times, go with the crowd, especially when they're uncertain, the complex challenges, and they see things one way and everyone else sees it differently, and they'll just be quiet in many cases. Let me see if I can get here. All right, I'm going to play a quick video. It's called the Ash Experiment that really drives home social proof. Let's see, 1 second. To find a better way to go from one screen to the other on this when I pull up these videos. Here it is.
Dad, I can't figure out how to put this desk together.
I get an ad.
No worries. Be right there.
Ooh.
Can everyone hear this?
Falcon background?
Just give me a nod.
Nice.
Okay.
I can hear it.
Leia's on board too.
Good one, Dad.
Would you? After just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Oh, Mom, we can't see the video.
Can you see the video?
No, we can only hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see here. Okay, I'm gonna skip that just so we on time. But basically, I would say go to YouTube and look up the ASCHE experiment. And there's different experiments around it, just basically showing how people conform to the crowd. In many cases, you may have seen the ones where a person's in the elevator and actors walk in and they just face the back wall, and then slowly but surely that person will start to turn around and face the back wall as well. In this example, this is a waiting room, a doctor's office, and they had actors and they had one subject who was just watching everyone else. And every time the beep went off, they would stand up. And at first she looks around like, what's this? What is this going on? But then she starts to stand up with everyone as well. So every time it beeps, she's standing up. And eventually they have all the actors leave the room and she's just doing it by herself with no one in the room. But then every time it beeps, she's still doing it. Doesn't know why, but she just knew the crowd was doing it. It's probably the right thing to do. And then they had new people come into the office that had no idea. And she's doing it by herself with them in the crowd. And then they started to do it as well. They're just watching her and they're picking up the same thing. And ultimately, it just kept on persisting this for no reason. But as an ASH experiment, you'll see some really interesting study around that. And in some cases where, there's an example where they do a study and the subject they're asking questions that are very obvious that everyone can answer, but the person, they can see how long, they say like how long a line is and which one they say, which one line is longer. And the subject will, in some cases, go with the crowd right away. In some cases, they'll go against the crowd maybe once or twice, but after a while they get fatigued and say, you know what, I'm tired of being the outcast. I'm just gonna go, it's easier to go with the crowd. And you'll find that happen in many cases where, folks will pick their battles many times and they'll go against the crowd a couple of times, but there's a fatigue to it. And all of a sudden they just conform to everyone else as well. And that happens many times when we're trying to be more diverse, but not inclusive, when there's a term called tokenization, where you have one or two people and think that you've done your job, that you're now, you're now diverse, if you will. But let's see here. That's probably what it was. Did you guys see this static page here? Is that what you saw? Okay, I understand what I did wrong. I thought that was the video. Okay. I do have another video towards the end and we'll see if we can get that one going. But that's why tokenism is also a performative way of diversity. It's when, the practice of making only a perfunctory or symbolic effort to do a particular thing, especially by recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups in order to give them the appearance of gender and racial equality within the workforce or within your board. But the reality is many times that social proof, of having such a dominant presence of a homogeneous board and having one or two people, whether it's gender diversity or racial ethnic diversity, that person may not feel the psychological safety in order to even have conflict or even bring their views to the table. And they also show in the ASH experiment when a person has at least one or two people that see things the way they see it, they're much more confident in bringing it to the table. And again, you want to create an environment where these potential blind spots are able to, the person feels comfortable in doing so. So it's really important to think about that as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also, our company, when we do consulting, we do consulting with organizations throughout the region as well. We have a framework called the domains of DEI, domains of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And depending on the size of your organization, maybe some of these apply to you. Some organizations, all of these apply to your organization. So it's not just about, again, diverse faces on your board. It's about making sure you look at ways to institutionalize diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the organization. So when we think about governance, your board, the diversity on your board, the inclusivity of your board, the equity of your board, When you think about leadership, your executive leadership team. When you think about talent management, recruitment, retention, development, performance reviews, it's all part of your HR process, your benefits that you're offering. Thinking about having an equity lens, a diversity lens in that respect. Organizational culture, does your organizational culture potentially exclude people? Our leadership development trainer that we that is part of our team, she talks a lot about organizations, particularly in corporate organizations where golf is always the go-to, kind of networking environment. And a lot of times it's a lot of white men and doing golf, and a woman may not feel comfortable golfing with a bunch of men, in an environment like that. Or there's in Silicon Valley, you have this startup culture where it's very, hang out afterwards, grab drinks, and it's exclusive to people who have families or may have generational diversity in that respect. So thinking about your culture and who it potentially excludes, just in the nature of the activities and ways that you build culture or build relationships, and how that disproportionately empowers others and disempowers others. Your product or service, your program portfolio, thinking about keeping your end user in mind. The for-profit sector are always thinking about their customers, thinking about your products and your customers. They talk to customers, they do research. Many times nonprofit organizations don't talk to anyone, any of their constituents in developing the programs. We just think that, we have the best ideas and we know what's best for people, but never ask the actual end user what they need and how your programs may impact them as well. Procurement, supplier diversity, where are you spending your dollars? Are you thinking about companies and businesses that are minority owned, or for the communities that you're serving, having supplier diversity? And many times those organizations that are external to you, that are doing work for you, can bring a level of diversity, perspective, and innovation that you don't have or did not generate within your organization, but by doing that through supplier diversity. Marketing and communications internally as well as externally. Think about community engagement and how you're recruiting and how you're fundraising. Do you have diversity in your development? Or does your development director or the person, your executive director, are they cultivating people that are not within their immediate networks? Cultivating potential donors that down the line could become board members. What about policy and advocacy? If your organization is doing advocacy, around a cause, are you really thinking about all the implications and sometimes unintended consequences? And we will open up for questions in about 4 minutes. So we're actually getting to our 9:15 point shortly. Policy, and lastly is investments. I've been encouraging the organizations that I serve on that have endowments. We can be spending all of our time working on great causes, but if our dollars are going to organizations that are continuing to compound those issues, that's a challenge as well. Investing in our values. There's actually a great website. I'll post it when we're asking questions here. Impact PHL actually recently shared this with me, this link around ESG aligned investments, where you can actually see it a lot more clearly. You can Google invest my values. I think that's actually the website .org. Invest my values, and actually shows some of the major social issues and how organizations are kind of compounding the industrial complex around prison industrial complex, or gender inequality, and how our investments can be compounding some of the issues that we're trying to solve in many cases. So it's important to think about these things and have structures in place to have a cadence of accountability around it. So I want to end it. I'm going to end it with, I'm not going to go through this. Again, as I told you, this is a 90-minute presentation that we'll typically go through. I just want to end it with the idea of building constructive conflict, the culture of constructive conflict. And the boards that I serve on or chair, I always try to bring other people's perspectives. I particularly like those who have a different perspective than I do, and are willing to share those. And for me to stress test my thoughts, and for them to stress test their ideas, and for us to come to a common understanding of challenges. But many times we prioritize harmony over conflict. And there's a difference between relationship conflict or destructive conflict and constructive conflict. And the way we have constructive conflict, idea conflict versus relationship conflict is to always keep the vision, the mission, the values of the organization, the North Star. It's not about us individually. It's not about our egos. It's not about, us being right in many cases. If we have that level of humility to listen to others, to hear other perspectives, and to be willing to be wrong and to stress test our own ideas and thoughts is important. Don't take conflict personal. It's not attacking you. Hopefully we're all sitting around the table with the same end goal in mind. Asset frame the culture adds. Many times we want people to be a culture fit, like to be just like us and to just, someone you want to have a drink with, if you will. It's kind of how we many times say culture fit. But what about culture add? Who's adding a dimension of diversity to your organization that's going to help you to have, again, better accuracy of solutions? Curiosity, empathy, respect, and humility are key, attributes of a board member, especially those, again, who are coming with a lot of knowledge many times, but again, may have a small pan and may be cutting, on impact by not having this level of humility and cultural humility. Encourage new ideas and input, not echo chambers. Challenge ideas, not people. It's, again, the difference between idea conflict and relationship conflict. The willingness to challenge your own ideas and beliefs, to stress test our own ideas and beliefs. Again, I'll recommend a great video. I'll summarize it really quick. There's a Heineken commercial, and I can actually, I'll post the link as well for y'all to watch in your own time. But it's a great video of, basically people who I have different ideas, ideology, and it's a lot of political ideas, whether it's feminism versus, it's pretty deep, where they have people sitting in the same room. They build relationships first. They actually videotape them with their ideas that are very controversial and totally polar opposite. They have them work together, put together a table together, getting to know each other, asking questions about their families. And then once they've gotten to know each other, then they play the videos and they watch each other and realize they're on total different spectrum as far as these ideas, and two people who would never be in the same room together if they knew what each of them thought. But afterwards, because they built the level of relationship, at the end, they said, would you like to just leave or have a drink together? And that's where Heineken comes in, or have a beer together. And everyone said, you know what? I want to have a beer. And everyone talks it out. And you see how, again, we have much more in common than our differences. And when your boards think about that, your board governance, you think about building those relationships, those genuine relationships where we're not questioning a person's heart. We're just questioning, we have different ideas and ways of getting to the same end result. That's when, boards can really work together in a way that can be very positive, that can have constructive conflict and move the needle on challenges, the big challenges that we're all looking to solve. So with that, I'm going to end it there. And we will, let me actually stop sharing here. And Nicole, if you want to lead us off on our question to answer, how you want that to happen, I'll be happy to.
Sure. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I love that you used examples that were non-confrontational for understanding, because sometimes when you mention race, people are automatically on the defense, so using those examples were really helpful to uncover what real unconscious bias looks like. So